Nothing can replace a godly man living and loving his wife and loving his kids and sacrificing for the kingdom globally. Nothing can replace that. And we need men like that all over the world that are giving their lives for the sake of the kingdom and giving their lives for the sake of their families.
What's going on? This is Brett Snodgrass with another episode of the Iron Deep podcast, and I got a good friend on the podcast episode with me. He is no stranger to this particular podcast. He's actually been on here a couple times. Mr. Josh Howard. What's going on, Josh?
Hey, Brett. Good to be here again, man. It's awesome to get on today and chat with you a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'm really looking forward to this particular podcast episode. We got a lot to unpack today just about Josh. And if you guys haven't heard of Josh Howard, he's actually been on the podcast a couple of times. He, when we transitioned more from the real estate podcast to more of a purposeful impact podcast about kingdom podcast, he was one of our very first guests on our particular podcast. We talked about his mission field in India. He's actually lived in India for the last 16 plus years with his wife and his family. They've been planning several thousands of churches in India. He is a discipleship maker. Another organization he's part of is discipleship.org. So he's really, just to introduce you, Josh, you have really excited about making disciples for the kingdom, and that's, I think, been your calling. That's been your passion. That's obviously Jesus' last words, right? To make disciples of all the nations, and that's exactly what you're doing. And you're in this new transition, you're in this new season that we're going to really unpack and talk about, and you're actually joining into the Iron Deep organization, which I'm super excited about because I love your heart, I love your experience, and I love your passion for spreading the gospel and the kingdom and discipleship in Iron Deep as well throughout. So, but let's just talk about a little bit more about you. Those who have not listened to those particular episodes, let's talk about Josh Howard. Who are you, and kind of what have you been up to, man?
Yeah, bro. So like you mentioned, for 16 years, we've been here in South Asia, and I married a beautiful woman a little over 16 years ago. She's an Indian woman who just has a beautiful heart, an incredible heart, and we've been serving with her parents. Actually, her parents started a organization called Central India Christian Mission. It's been 40 something years ago now, almost 45 years ago, that they started that organization. And so for the first 15 years that I was here, I was working with that organization, doing mainly two things. We were leading a church planting school where we were raising up young church planters to go to start new churches in unreached areas. And then I also launched a branch of the ministry called Ignite that was all about, like you mentioned, disciple making and multiplying disciples and then multiplying simple house churches out of that. And so our vision really was to help raise up everyday people on how they can go make disciples, how they can share their faith, how they can spread the love and the light of Jesus everywhere that they go. And so that's really what we've been focused on. Things in South Asia got pretty difficult over the last 2 years or so. And so about a year ago, I actually had to step away from the organization for multiple different reasons that we don't have to go into on this podcast. But with the government and all sorts of different issues against Christianity here in South Asia, it really kind of forced our hand to make a transition. And so that's kind of what leads us to this next season. But our heartbeat for this entire time has really been how do we build the kingdom and multiply the kingdom all over South Asia in multiple different nations. And that's really been what we dream about, what we pray about, what we focus on every day. And that's really been our heartbeat. My wife, for 19 years, led a children's home or an orphanage here in South Asia. And because of all the government issues, the government actually came in and shut down the children's home about 3 or 4 months ago now. And so that was incredibly difficult and incredibly emotional. But she really has given her life for impoverished kids and orphan children here in South Asia as well. And is really, she's just an incredible woman. So wow. Anyway, that's kind of the 30,000 foot view, man, without getting into too many of the deeper details. But yeah.
Yeah, well, I know, those who are listening in it might not seem like it, but Josh is obviously, his whole family is in this transition when you talk about just persecution, right? And sometimes here in America, uh, we don't have that. We don't have a lot of that persecution with the Christian church, but it is real. Throughout the world, it is completely real, and you're having a lot of just government persecution, it sounds like, with your own role and planning these churches with your wife's. I mean, I can't imagine the emotional toll that's been on someone who has put their life into something for a decade plus, 15, 19 years, I think you believe you said, and then having someone just come in and shut it out. And they
Yeah.
can, and just to have that control, I can't imagine what that's like. And whenever you talk, Josh, the thing that I love is it really just goes back to the early church. I think you've done revivals in Sri Lanka lately that I've been kind of following a little bit, and just kind of the mission, the discipleship making throughout India really just reminds us of the early church. Sometimes here in America, we think of church as the big church with a screen, with a band, things like that. And really, it's really just going back to that everyday people, early church,
Yeah.
going from town to town, going from house to house, building out and discipleship making and building that community. And can you describe that just a little bit more of the movement of these aren't the big building churches, but these are just everyday people going out and going from town to town and just preaching the message, the good news. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely, bro. I've got a buddy of mine in England. He's a good friend. His name's Steve Uppel, and he says all the time that kind of the goal behind these movements is to get back to factory settings or to get back to the blueprint of the early church. And so basically, at the end of the day, that's really what our heart is. It's to take the essence and the foundation that Jesus built in the Gospels and the book of Acts and basically say, what does it look like to live like that now? What does it look like to continue the movement that Jesus started 2,000 years ago? And there are a few main things that we really focus on in order to see that happen. And really the main ones are this: we want to raise up and release the priesthood of all believers. And so it's not just about having professionals that are out there, the pastors and the preachers and the bishops and the cardinals or whoever you want to, whatever titles you want to give them, reverends. It's really not just about the professionals. It's about raising up the priesthood of all believers, raising up the laity to be disciples who make disciples. Because really, at the end of the day, Jesus called all of us, not just the leaders of churches, but every single person, to be a disciple who makes more disciples. And so, in order to see that happen, the majority of our time and energy and effort has gone into training, equipping, and releasing everyday ordinary people in order to teach them how do they go out, how do they begin to share the love of Jesus with people, how do they present the gospel in simple, reproducible ways, and then how do they make disciples of people that respond, disciples of people that say yes, and then form them into small communities, which end up looking a lot like house churches or small churches that don't have the brick and mortar buildings, but they're meeting, 10, 15, 20 people in a house or an apartment or in a coffee shop and studying the word together, discipling one another, and then being obedient to King Jesus with their lives. Really, at the end of the day, we're trying to teach people how do they hear the voice of Jesus or the voice of the Holy Spirit and immediately do whatever he says. Because at the core of disciple making, that's what it is. And that's what the Great Commission even says, right? Like, go make disciples of all nations, baptize them, and then teach them to obey everything I've commanded. Like, teach them to really follow me, teach them to be like me. That's really what Jesus's heartbeat was. And so that's what our heart has become. How do we get out there and raise up and equip everyday people who can really look like Jesus, talk like Jesus, love like Jesus, and be a true disciple and follower of Jesus, who can go make more disciples and followers of him and build communities around that so that we can take the love of Jesus to as many places as possible. And so it's rapid reproduction, man. We're seeing people that come to faith and they're immediately equipped and trained on how to go reach their friends and family, how to tell other people about him. We've got one of our leaders here in India that we partner with, and a quote that he says often is that the sharpest tool in God's hands is the testimony of a new believer.
Mm,
right? The
mm,
sharpest tool in God's hands is a testimony of a new believer. And so we want, as soon as somebody comes to faith, we want to equip them and disciple them on how they can also share that passion and love that they found, the love of Jesus that they found with people around them. And so they're immediately going out, similar to the Samaritan woman in the Bible or the Gadarene demoniac who was possessed with a legion of evil spirits, and Jesus casts them all out into the pigs. And then this guy goes and preaches to 10 cities, right? Or like I mentioned, the Samaritan woman who meets Jesus one time and then goes and reaches her whole village with the gospel. Those are the kinds of people we're looking for, man. People that are passionate, excited, they've had a true encounter with Jesus, and then we try to help disciple them and help them go reach their friends and family and start simple churches in their homes.
mm.
Um, and so all that to say, Brett, in the last 10 years, man, we've now seen well over 30,000 new churches started in the last 10 years. I think our most recent numbers, because some of them merged together, some of them quit meeting, you know what I mean? I think our most recent numbers, we've got somewhere around 23,000 active churches in our network right now that are meeting every single week.
Mm.
And it's just unbelievable to see what God is doing. He's raising up so many people to see movements of multiplication happen in not only here in the nation we live in, but all the surrounding countries as well. And so it's been remarkable to see, bro.
Yeah, no, that's amazing, and thank you so much for sharing. I love that. I wrote that down. Just the sharpest tool in God's hand is the testimony of a new believer. I think that's so powerful, and again, it's contagious. I know that if you're out there and you've seen someone experience the Holy Spirit for the first time, and they give their life to Christ, total surrender, and then see their life over the next week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, months, and it's contagious. The hunger that they have, the surrender that they have. I think that's amazing, and so many stories of the Bible just talks through that, like you mentioned, the Samaritan woman. So let's talk about, you've been doing some of these different activities with these unreached people groups, and you just got back from a recent mission to Sri Lanka, and that's been one of just one of the things that the callings that your organization has really gone after. And it was just amazing to see, because I've actually never been a part of something like that, and where
You got to be, bro. You got to
yeah.
come, man.
And it's really powerful, because I have everything again at our fingertips, and if I want to listen to a message or listen to the audio Bible, or I have probably 20 Bibles in my home, right? And I just kind of take that for granted, and everyone maybe has access to that, and that's not true. And you're going out there and you're talking to thousands of people who this might possibly really very well could be the very first time that they've heard this news, that this message, this gospel message, and this exciting. I think you had 6,000 or 7,000 people at the last night of this particular event, and you guys do a 3-day event, another 3-day event. You're really just evangelizing throughout these unreached people groups. Can you kind of talk about your experience with that, and what is that like to, again, going back to the early church, to talk to so many people who've never actually heard the gospel
Yeah.
message before?
Yeah, it is honestly some of the most exciting moments of my life, man. Honestly, like I think in the West, sometimes we just assume that people know who Jesus is. They've heard about him and they've rejected him or chosen not to follow or whatever. But there are millions of people. And I mean, most missiologists would say billions who have never actually heard a clear gospel presentation across the world. And so, yeah, we were in Sri Lanka. Our first 3 days there, we were in a completely unreached district. It was the most unreached district of Sri Lanka. And we did this event in the middle of 3 different villages, and all those 3 villages had no churches in them. Like you said, many of them had never heard the name of Jesus or heard anything about Jesus before in their lives. And we sent buses in order to get these people from the different villages and came. And we just preached very clear, simple gospel messages for 3 straight nights. And in this completely unreached area, man, we saw, I forget what the exact number was, but it was somewhere around 200 and I think it was 240 or something like that. I'll have to look at my numbers, but we had like 200 and something people. I think it was like 40 or 50, 240 or 50 people who said yes to Jesus for the first time in their lives. We saw miracles happen, man. Like, and I grew up in a church that said that stuff doesn't happen anymore. Like I,
Right.
I grew up in a church that said that stuff died with the apostles. And here I am in Sri Lanka, and we're just praying over people, and God is touching them, man, and radically transforming their lives. I mean, we saw deaf ears open, we saw blind eyes open, we saw people that we had one guy that had a stroke, and he was paralyzed on one side of his body, and he could move both sides of his body after Jesus touched him. We saw people like literally, like we read about in the Gospels in the book of Acts, possessed with evil spirits that were completely set free and delivered. It was incredible to see it. And it was like we were on the front lines in the pages of the book of Acts, just watching God move. It was incredible. And it just showed us, man, that Jesus is still alive, right? And then right after that, we went to a city that does have churches in it, but there are tons of unreached people in the city. And that's where we had our bigger event. So we partnered with like 75 local churches in order to try to reach as many lost people with the gospel as possible. And at that event, on our final night, we had like 7,000 people on the ground in order to, it was like an open air gospel event. Think about like a crusade or something or whatever. And so there we saw, over 3 days, we saw 1,340 people give their lives to Jesus, which is just crazy. So over the course of 6 days, man, we saw over 1,600 people say yes to Jesus, countless miracles, countless people that were set free and delivered from demonic attacks in their lives. It was unbelievable, man, and incredible to see. And just to see these people that were so hungry for the gospel, that many of them, like you said, had never heard his name before, and yet here they are, hungry and ready to accept him into their lives. Man, Jesus is alive. He is active. He is working. We still serve the Luke 15 God, man, who's leaving the 99 to go after the one. He's still sweeping under tables looking for lost coins. He's still stepping out on his front porch every morning looking for lost kids to run home, you know? And when we go meet him in those places, and when we meet him amongst lost people, I mean, God just does remarkable, incredible things in those moments. And anyway, it was incredible to be a part of it, man, and to see what God did.
Man, that's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah, thanks so much for sharing. If we get a chance, I know you had a couple of videos you actually sent to me. We'll maybe put some of that on our YouTube channel as well, just during this particular episode. So that's awesome. So Josh, again, I'm super excited just to have you come on to the Iron Deep organization. You have so much experience, discipleship making. You've done some amazing just ministry for the kingdom and these unreached people groups. And then now, one of the parts of this episode really is just talking about this transition, this change, right? You've been in India for the last 16 years. You've been doing this type of church planting ministries. Your wife's been doing, impoverished children in that organization that she's been a part of, leading that. And then now you're actually moving from India to Indiana, which which is cool, right? So you're moving actually.
My wife said it had to have India in the name if we were going to move there, so it had to be Indiana.
So you're actually moving from India to Indiana, and I know portion of this is again some of the dark persecution that your family has experienced and some of the trauma that's been happening. And but there's obviously this other calling to your life. You're moving to Indiana, and you're in this season of change right now. So I know we've had a little bit of personal conversations, but what is this like for you personally? I know your family and your wife is going through her emotional levels of this transition, but you personally, you've been planted in this location for years now, and then now you're coming back to the States. And what is this like for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of mixed emotions, man. You being on the field, on the front lines, overseas really does become a part of your identity. It becomes a part of who you are. I feel like, even for our listeners watching, there are men that I've talked to before, and even Brett, you talked to me about a season you went through like this too, where like entrepreneurs who are leading a business and then they either hand it over or sell it. And now, who are they? What
Mm-hmm.
is their identity? Right. And it's the same thing on the mission field. It's like, for so long, this has been who I am. And now we're transitioning into a new season. Now I'm still going to be doing ministry, and I'm still going to be, which we'll talk about that for a few minutes, but there is some identity pieces going on. We're also moving away from my wife's family. They have been pillars in our lives. I mean, they have been such an incredible blessing to us for so many years. And the idea of living 10,000 miles away from them for the first time since we got married is going to be incredibly difficult. We will be closer to my family, so it's always bittersweet feelings, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
there are sweet things that are coming in this next season, that we know that I'll be closer to my family, and we'll have friends that we're closer to that we've not been close to in a long time. But in order to get that, we're also leaving family and friends here. And so there's kind of those bitter feelings on that side, but the sweet feelings on the other side. And so there's a lot of mixed emotions, man. But we do know, my wife and I both know, that the Lord is leading us to take this step. We know that He's guiding us into this next season. And so her and I both have come to know for the last 16 years that the best place to be is right smack dab in the middle of God's will, wherever that is. And we do know that He's guiding us into this situation. And so I know that God has something special in store. And a couple things we're really looking forward to are what you mentioned. I'll be a part of the discipleship.org team, helping them with vision and strategy in the future. And also, being able to be a part of this Iron Deep team and pouring into men who, are, I believe, are going to shake cities and nations with the gospel. I think the people that are part of Iron Deep are becoming the men that God has called them to be every single day. Men that are going to lead their family strongly, be incredible husbands and fathers, but also be disciples who make disciples and shake nations with the gospel. And so to be able to be a part of that is incredibly exciting. And to be a part of helping churches all over America really experience true disciple making and multiplication. Putting those things together, I'm incredibly, incredibly excited about.
Yeah. No, man, and we're super excited to have you. I know, again, I've already mentioned this before, but just your passion, number one. Every time I talk to you, I come away, I think, inspired, encouraged, just to keep going, keep running the race. Sometimes, again, as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, you can seem alone, seem isolated. I'm sure even on the mission field, as I've even done Iron Deep, you're right. You're leading, you're trying to do what God's calling you to do, but it can also seem a little bit alone at times. So it's always nice, again, iron sharpens iron, to come together with other brothers. I come away encouraged, a little bit more fiery and hungry for the calling that God's placed here on this ministry. Super excited to have you. And then I love what you talked about, just men. Let's dive into that a little bit deeper. Is that when you looked at Iron Deep, you're seeing these businessmen and businessmen come into the Lord. Being a good steward of not only their businesses but their families, their finances, and again, that's where I kind of see the influence that they have on their workplace, their families, their communities, and that's how we can spread even further. And can you take us into just, when you're thinking about that, and I was talking to you about Iron Deep and really just wanting to impact business owner men's lives. Talk to us about that a little bit deeper on what do you see out there, again, even as a missionary, and you're seeing these other mission organizations, how can businessmen impact the kingdom in such an amazing way?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are. Well, here's a couple big things just right off the top of my head. Seeing the Great Commission completed in our lifetime, and seeing lost people reached and broken people healed, and impoverished people, set free out of poverty, and all those things, it takes significant resources. It really does. And so, at the end of the day, it is normally businessmen and successful men and families that are either donating to mission organizations financially or to the local church, and that local church is then sending money to some of these mission organizations. And so some of these successful businessmen have really been the backbone of seeing mission work happen for years and years and years. It's the resources that they're able to provide for the kingdom that is making an incredible impact across the world. And none of what we've done in South Asia, none of what my in-laws have done in South Asia, none of what other missionary friends that I have done across the world would be possible without faithful men and women that are sacrificing and being incredibly generous with their resources in order to see that happen. And so, for those of you out there that are listening right now that are, in the business world, you're a believer, man, I just want to encourage you, like all the fruit that we've been talking about, the churches planted and the the people reached and the disciples made and all that type of stuff, the people coming to faith, that is the fruit of incredibly sacrificial, generous men and women across the world. None of that would be possible without people like you. And so that is one major way. But it's not just finances, guys. Like we have people that are giving time and energy and talents and thinking strategically. Businessmen are some of the most strategic, creative people in the world. I mean, they're entrepreneurial. They know how to get around problems. They know how to overcome roadblocks. They know how to start stuff and keep it going and make it sustainable and create systems and processes around it. All of that is necessary to see the Great Commission completed in our lifetime.
Mm.
And so it's not just that we need checks sent across the world. We need men and women who are gifted in these different areas to give their resources and their talents and their abilities for the sake of the kingdom globally. And when people do that, Brett, man, they are going to be able to shake cities and nations with the gospel. And we want to make sure that we're focused on the things that are truly going to make eternal impact, right? And make a significant impact across the world. And so anyway, I think that. And let me say one more thing. I know we're almost out of time, but this gets me excited just thinking about pouring into men like this. When businessmen are when they become the husbands that God has called them to be, and when they become the husbands that God has called them to be and the fathers that God has called them to be, when we have strong families and strong local churches because of these strong men who are leading well with integrity, with character, strong families produce incredible children, and incredible children raise up to be the future doctors and nurses and missionaries and preachers and pastors and engineers who can impact the globe with the gospel, no matter where they're at. And so these men, when they are creating strong families and strong local churches, that in and of itself is making disciples that impact the nations with the gospel. And these things, man, I mean, there is nothing can replace a godly man living and loving his wife and loving his kids and sacrificing for the kingdom globally. Nothing can replace that man. And we need men like that all over the world that are giving their lives for the sake of the kingdom and giving their lives for the sake of their families.
Man, I love it. I love it. Well, that again, inspiring, encouraging, and just again, if you're listening in, just encouraging you to you're not alone. I've said that before, that you're not alone, that we can all come together and to raise each other up, to sharpen each other, to encourage each other to be who God has called us to be. And it then starts in your home, to be that husband that your wife said yes to forever to, right? And to pursue God and to pursue her, and to pursue your children, and to start as your first mission field to disciple them in an amazing godly way. So that's awesome. Josh, it's awesome to have you as part of the Iron Deep organization. We're super excited. I know you're having this big change, this big transition, and we want to welcome you just in an amazing way. I know there's going to be some differences culturally and things like that. How can really someone, a community, come in and support, like a family like yours coming in, coming from a completely different culture, and we have this happening all the time, but like what's a way that like you um would say, hey, an amazing welcoming community to welcome a family like yours, because I know the cultural differences are going to be huge, but what's your hope it would coming to America with the community surrounding you? What does that look like, and your hopes for that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, number one, I covet everyone's listening, like everyone who's listening, your prayers for, especially for my wife and kids. My wife has never lived long term outside of India, and so this is going to be really her first major transition internationally. She's visited America hundreds of times, but has not lived there long term, and so this is going to be a major transition for her. My kids have been born and raised here, and so for them going to the States to live for the first time, they'll be in school in the States for the first time. I would just covet all of your prayers for that. So that, I mean, prayer covering is huge, Brett. Number one. I think number two, depending on where everybody's at, if you've got a family like ours coming in, I would also encourage you. One big transition is just learning like uh, how to live with the systems and structure in the States, because the systems are completely different here, right? And we've not lived there in 16 years. I was shocked, bro, to know how much stuff costs now in America, and like
Yeah.
tried to do our budget. I was like, holy cow! Like just thinking through all that,
Right.
and so getting on a rhythm of cooking and cleaning the house and making sure that our kids are taken care of and all those things. I mean, I would just say reach out to families like that. Offer, if you want to, if somebody would like to, if you have a family like ours coming into your city or town, bring in a couple nights worth of food to put in a freezer to bless the family right as they get there, so they don't have to worry about, man, we got to go get groceries and we got to cook
Mhm.
food and we got to take care of everything. I mean, stuff like that is a huge blessing. As families transition, especially from a place like South Asia to the US, the financial change is pretty significant.
Mhm.
And so just blessing a family financially, and I don't mean major money, I'm not talking stuff like that, but blessing them in small ways financially is a huge gift. I mean, we've had friends that, for example, one of the biggest blessings was they put together like an Amazon registry for our house, and several people from a couple different churches ordered several things we needed for our home, like pots and pans and silver, almost like a housewarming type of a
Yeah.
gift or party. And they put together something like that. Like, I would encourage, if you've got a family moving in like that, that was such a blessing for us. Like, putting together some sort of registry for their house when they're moving in to bless them with something like that would be beautiful and incredible. Just things like that, Brett. When you think of a family moving in, there's so many things to think about. They get so overwhelmed, and just letting them know that you're there for them, letting them
Mhm.
know you're praying for them, that you love them, notes of encouragement, food here and there, stuff like that. I think those things are huge blessings.
Mm. Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. I love that. And really just reaching out and see how can we help and how can we support you, because you can't imagine like you guys aren't bringing in this U-Haul truck, right, to with all this
Right.
stuff, right, that we have. And
Yeah.
so it's crazy how all these little things that you don't have that you need could be as simple as
Yep.
the pots and pans. So that's awesome. Well, we welcome you, and we'll be praying for you, and just during this transition for you and your whole family. Well,
Thank
thanks
you,
you
bro.
so much again for joining the Iron Deep team. It's been awesome on this particular podcast, guys. Josh Howard will be a part of the Iron Deep organization. So, part of his role here, which I haven't even mentioned, was really just kind of helping out produce some of this content, right? So he will be part of this particular podcast, which you guys have already seen. So much inspiration and encouragement, and just the passion and love for Christ that he has, that he's just really going to bring in the content space of podcasts and some videos. He's really, really awesome at that. He's also written a couple of books, so he's also going to be doing some writing some content for the Iron Deep organization, and he'll also be doing some of the recruiting and just talking and discipleship making of our organization. So when we have new events, he might be the person that you particularly will talk to about that event. We have an event called the Men's Awakening coming up September 22nd through the 25th in Georgia. So he might be the person that talks to you about that. And really, that's going to be really part of his role. So you're going to be seeing his face. You're going to be getting to know him a little bit more. If you come to an event, he will eventually start to be part of the Iron Deep events as he kind of gets, transitioned in first and settled in with the organization. But it's awesome to have you, Josh. Super just amazed to walk on this journey with you, buddy. And so thank you so much. Awesome. Well, this is
No,
a
thank you, Brett. It's an honor, bro. Appreciate you, man.
You too, man. Well, this is a wrap with the Iron Deep podcast. We're going to do another podcast actually next with Josh Howard, and we're going to be digging a little bit more of a fun podcast about fatherhood. So make sure you guys stay tuned for that in a week or two. Also, with that, check out our website at irondeep.com. We do have an event called the Men's Awakening coming up. It's in northern Georgia, in the mountains of Georgia, and it's the September 22nd through the 25th. You can register and apply on irondeep.com. Love to see you there. I mean, this is basically businessmen all under one roof getting together. Typically, it's about 25, 30 guys, and it's just an amazing experience. We've had so much great response just to get away, to retreat from the battle lines and the front lines, to be together and get to know other businessmen in a really real and raw way, and get to know our Father in a real and raw way. So make sure you guys check that out. We got other stuff coming up on irondeep.com, and that's a wrap. We'll see you guys soon.